Straight ahead on Law&Crime Daily. Johnny Depp reaches a settlement with a one-time crew member who said the actor got physical on set. And
it was a nationwide scheme that defrauded elderly and vulnerable people out of millions.
Real Housewives of Salt Lake City star Jen Shah pleads guilty to defrauding hundreds. Plus,
did you have any involvement in Heather Frank's death?
No.
Kevin Eastman faces trial for a double homicide in Colorado, but the defense points the finger at a different suspect. And later, months after he defies a subpoena to appear, Steve Bannon's contempt of court trial will soon begin. Law&Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law&Crime Daily. I'm your host, Brian Buckmire. A trial was scheduled to start in Los Angeles this month where Johnny Depp was going to defend himself against allegations he assaulted a member of a crew on a film set. But now the case has been settled. Law&Crime's Anjanette Levy is here with the details.
Brian, you know, there were some rumblings in the last few weeks that this case could possibly settle, so this isn't a complete surprise. Rocky Brooks had accused Johnny Depp of assaulting him on the set of a film back in 2017 when they were both working together. Now, that film was shot in Los Angeles, and it was City of Lies. It told the story of a detective trying to solve the murders of Tupac Shakur and the notorious B.I.G. Brooks claimed in a lawsuit that he told Depp they had to stop filming one night because a permit had expired for that area, and that Depp then punched him twice in the ribs and offered Brooks $100,000 to punch him in the face. Later that night, though, Brooks and Depp took a photo together. It was a cell phone photo. But a woman working on the set submitted a declaration to the court saying this wasn't true, at least Brooks's account wasn't, and that Brooks had become belligerent with a homeless woman and that Depp told Brooks to stop yelling at her. Emma Danoff wrote that she had timestamp photos of the encounter that disputed Brooks's account. Now, the terms of the settlement are confidential, so we may never know exactly how much Depp paid, if anything. And at this point in time, it doesn't appear that either side is commenting.
Thanks, Anjanette. Joining us today is criminal defense attorney Bernarda Villalona, co-host Terri Austin, and Anjanette Levy. Bernarda, with such powerful evidence, an eyewitness, time-stamped photos, why do you think, or do you think, sorry, it would be smarter for Depp to have gone to trial?
No, not at all. I think it was smart for him to actually settle, because at least when you settle, you know for a fact what's going to happen and what the dollar amount is going to be. Aside from that, you don't want that negative publicity, because even though you were successful against Amber Heard, who's to say that you're going to be successful this time around? And we already know how much publicity you got around the Amber Heard allegations, so you don't want to repeat that now. Let's just put everything to rest and just move on with our lives. And I think that's what Johnny Depp wanted to do in this case.
Yeah, Terri, and will the settlement amount ever be known? How and why are these amounts secret?
You know, we may never know the exact amount of the settlement. Often these types of settlements are confidential, and that's to the benefit of both parties. You neither want to deny nor admit anything, and disclosing the amount could actually lead people to jump to the wrong conclusion. So for instance, if it's a very low amount, they could jump to the conclusion that nothing happened, that the defendant was innocent. If it's a higher amount, they could jump to the conclusion that the plaintiff was absolutely correct. So we don't know either one of those things. You don't want anyone to jump to any sort of conclusions that might not be factual.
All right, we'll keep our feet on the ground with this one. No jumping to conclusions. Anjanette, why do you think the case was settled?
Well, I think there could be any number of reasons, Brian. Sometimes it's cheaper to just write a check than to pay a lot of money for legal fees and to go to trial. Sometimes that costs a lot more. And keep in mind, Johnny Depp is touring right now in Europe with Jeff Beck. They've been on tour since the very end of the defamation trial that Johnny Depp was involved in with his ex-wife. So he's got work obligations. He's going to start shooting a film later this summer in France. So coming back over here to the United States for 3 days for a trial just may not have been worth it.
You know, of course, he still has to pay his lawyers from his other defamation trial, and it's not expected that Amber Heard is going to be paying that $15 million or whatever it is when you deduct the caps anytime soon. So maybe it's smarter for him to resolve this case and move on with his tour. Thanks, everyone, and thank you, Anjanette, for the input. Also in California, Olympic medalist Kim Glass is physically assaulted and nearly blinded when a man attacks her outside an LA restaurant. The volleyball player first shared the story via social media, saying the man who appeared to be homeless threw a metal object at her, which she believed was a pipe. As a result, her eye socket was fractured. Glass says she noticed the man across the street before he threw an object at her. After that, she and several people nearby held the man down until police arrived. The 51-year-old suspect was taken to jail and booked on suspicion of assault with a deadly weapon. Right now, he's being held without bail. Glass recounted the incident on her Instagram story.
He had something in his hand he was on the other side of the car in the street, and he just looked at me with some pretty hateful eyes. And as I turned to go tell my friend, I think something's wrong with him and I think he's gonna hit the car. Before I knew it, a big metal bolt, pipe, hit me right here. It happened so fast. He literally flung it from the street, so he was not even close to me at all. Kind of took me down and out. Right now it looks like my vision will be okay, and I got really great stitching from a doctor. I have just amazing friends and family around me and supporting me, and that's been the best part. I do have multiple fractures up here and a small one here, but my friends have been family, amazing.
Still ahead on Law and Crime Daily, a Colorado man stands trial for a double homicide. But first, a Real Housewives reality star pleads guilty to defrauding hundreds of vulnerable victims. Welcome back. Real Housewives of Salt Lake City reality star Jen Shah pleads guilty to defrauding hundreds of victims in a telemarketing scheme. Shah pled guilty on Monday, just 1 week before her trial was expected to begin. Prosecutors say Shah took part in a nationwide scheme that largely targeted elderly people. Shah convinced victims she could provide financial security and stability, but instead defrauded hundreds of people out of their savings. Shah pled guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. As part of that plea agreement, she will pay $6.5 million in forfeiture and could pay up to $9.5 million in restitution. Sentencing guidelines show a range from 11 to 14 years behind bars, but a federal judge could hand down a heftier sentence. Adam Klasfeld, managing editor of Law&Crime.com, explains what Shah admitted to during Monday's hearing.
She admitted, pursuant to her plea agreement, that she targeted, victimized people over the age of 55. At least more than 10 of the victims were over that age, and targeted vulnerable people, according to prosecutors as well. And basically, it was built as coaching for supposed online business opportunities, which she admitted in court today had little or no value. Prosecutors said that she tried to evade law enforcement essentially by moving the business operations from Manhattan to Kosovo. So we'll surely be learning more about it upon her upcoming sentencing, which is now scheduled shortly after Thanksgiving. We'll learn around that time what prosecutors say. They will state out the scheme in detail. But basically what we know about it is that it was a nationwide scheme that defrauded elderly and vulnerable people out of millions. Prosecutors said in court that it counted thousands of victims, a number of which would have testified at her trial had this gone to a trial.
Now, Terri, this is a criminal case, so my question for you is, could the victims of Shah have a civil case against her? And how likely would they win after this guilty plea?
Oh, they absolutely can bring a civil case, and I think they would be very likely to win, particularly since she's pled guilty. She's already going to pay $6.5 million in forfeiture and $9.5 million in restitution. It remains to be seen if the victims get any of that, and if they do, any amounts they would get in a civil action would be reduced by that amount. But she admitted that she had these promises, that she was wrong. She knew she was wrong, so they could sue for fraud. They could sue for reliance upon what she told them. And you have to believe that a jury would put themselves in the place of these innocent victims, and they would be sympathetic to the claims that they were defrauded. So the real question at the end of the day is whether or not she has deep pockets. Would she be able to pay anything, even if a civil suit was victorious? Because we know she will be in jail probably, at least from 11 to 14 years and maybe more.
Yeah. Now, former prosecutor in 2 different states and now criminal defense attorney Bernarda, how does forfeiture and restitution work in a criminal case? What if the defendant doesn't have the money to pay?
Jen Shah, she decided to mess with the wrong person, because when it comes to the federal system, first off, restitution is measured by the losses to the victims, and forfeiture is measured by the proceeds from the crime itself. What happens? Well, one, she's facing her sentence. So as a part of her sentence, she's going to be interviewed by a United States probation officer that's going to determine how much she has in terms of assets, how much she has in the bank, how much value does she have in terms of, does she have houses or anything, to determine what she's able to actually pay. But if she's not able to pay after a judge has determined that this is what you're supposed to give in restitution or forfeiture, she can face being sent back to jail for additional time because she failed to obey a court order. So that's a possibility in terms of the government getting their money.
I have a feeling we're going to see a lot fewer handbags in her possession over the next coming months after they're done with her. Thank you for that breakdown, both of you. And in California, a report reveals the state social service system failed the Turpin siblings, who were rescued from captivity in their parents' home 4 years ago. David and Louise Turpin abused their 13 children for years, until 2018, when their daughter Jordan managed to escape and tell police what was happening at home. She told officials her brothers and sisters, who ranged in age from 2 to 29, had been starved and sometimes chained to their beds. Authorities subsequently learned the Turpins had deprived their children of hygiene, education, sleep, healthcare, and more. The children were isolated from the world, some for decades, in what the media dubbed a house of horrors. David and Louise are now serving a life sentence in prison. But that's not where the abuse ended. According to the new report issued from outside investigators, some of the siblings received poor care after entering the foster care system, even being placed with caregivers who were later charged with child abuse. The months-long investigation said the system was short-staffed and underfunded, making it difficult to ensure safety and care. And in cult news, parole is denied for a one-time member of the Manson family who once described himself as Charlie Manson's right-hand man. Last week, a California panel denied parole for 79-year-old Bruce Davis. Prior to this, Davis was recommended for parole 7 times, but was rejected each time by the then California governors. Davis did not participate in the infamous 1969 Tate LaBianca murders in the Hollywood Hills, during which 6 people were killed by Manson family members in an effort to jumpstart a race war. Instead, Davis took part in the murder of Donald Shorty Shea, a ranch hand who worked with cult members. During the late 1960s, Manson's family members took up residence Spawn Ranch, which had previously been used as a backdrop for Western movies. Davis participated in the ranch hand's murder and turned himself over to police in 1970. From here, Davis must wait 3 more years to try parole again. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, jury selection will soon begin in Steve Bannon's contempt of court trial. Plus, we head to Colorado for gripping witness testimony, how a man there learned a homicide victim's body had been found on his property. Welcome back. We head now to Colorado for the double homicide trial of Kevin Dean Eastman, as the defendant's former employer takes the stand. It was on his property where one of the victims' bodies was found. Eastman is charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, tampering with a deceased human body, and tampering with physical evidence for allegedly killing his ex-girlfriend Heather Frank and her new love interest, local musician Stanley Scott Sessions, on separate days in February of 2020. Frank and Eastman both had arrest warrants in connection to Sessions' murder before Frank's body was found. Prosecutors say Eastman slit Sessions' throat in Frank's apartment, and that Eastman fatally shot Frank in the chest twice to silence the only witness to Sessions' killing, hiding her body on the property of his new employer. Troy Bannon. Investigators say Eastman burned Sessions' body and was allegedly preparing to burn Frank's body when he was arrested at a nearby gas station. Bonnell spent the entire day Monday on the stand. Eastman's defense attorney said Bonnell's inconsistent testimony from previous video interviews proved his lack of credibility as a witness. They pointed a finger at him for Frank's death after prosecutors specifically asked if he was involved.
When did you first learn of Heather Frank's deceased body being found on your property?
It would have been hours after I was at the police station.
Did you have any involvement in Heather Frank's death?
No.
On December 29th, 2020, you learned that your DNA, was found on Miss Frank.
I was told it was found on a pack of cigarettes.
That your DNA was found in a pack of cigarettes on her deceased body.
I did not hear that.
And you were asked at that point to explain why that was.
Yeah, I don't recall hearing that. I recall being asked about a pack of cigarettes how would that have my DNA be on a pack of cigarettes?
That was located on Miss Frank.
I did not hear the part where she had a pack of cigarettes on a deceased body.
Terri, do you think Bonnell had anything to do with Frank's murder, and do you believe it beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, look, I think it's a smart move for the defense to try to point to someone else. But I don't think that it has been shown beyond a reasonable doubt that Bonnell had anything to do with that murder. Yes, it was on his property, and frankly, that's not a good look. But I don't think that they've discovered or shown or demonstrated in any way, shape, or form that he had anything to do with the killing or even with the disposal of the body. So I think that the defense still has a very difficult case, and the defense is going to have a hard time showing that Kevin Eastman wasn't the one who obviously killed both of the victims and tried to, burn both of the bodies.
Yeah. Maybe he's not the other suspect, but Bernarda, what do you think of the defense's argument that Bonnell isn't credible? And if he's not, how does that hurt the prosecution's case?
Well, in terms of every witness that testifies for the prosecution, credibility is a huge role. It's a huge factor that the jury has to determine whether this witness is actually telling the truth. So if you're able to crack down on a person's credibility and the jury finds some kind of reasonable doubt because they can't believe this witness, then guess what? Whether you think he did it, didn't do it, or has some kind of inclination or gut feeling they did it, it doesn't matter, because you have to prove the defendant's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. And that piece of doubt right there will be enough to actually acquit him.
Yeah, it looks like the defense is getting two bites of the apple with this theory as to this witness. We'll see how it plays out. Make sure to follow the Law and Crime Network for gavel-to-gavel coverage on the Kevin Dean Eastman case. When we come back, Steve Bannon is headed to trial. What to expect as the former White House chief strategist stands trial for contempt of Congress. Welcome back to Law and Crime Daily. A federal judge orders the trial of former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon to move forward on charges of contempt of Congress. Bannon defied a subpoena from the January 6th committee last year to testify and provide documents related to his involvement in the efforts to overturn the 2020 election. When he didn't appear by the deadline, the Justice Department charged Bannon with 2 counts of contempt of Congress. Bannon made a last-minute offer this week to testify before the committee, days ahead of his criminal trial. The offer was accompanied by a letter from former President Donald Trump claiming to waive executive privilege over Bannon's testimony, a move the committee and Justice Department say may not be applicable to a former president. On Monday, a judge denied Bannon's request to delay the trial and ruled nearly every proposed defense from Bannon's attorney is irrelevant to the alleged crime against him. His trial is scheduled to begin next Monday. Bernarda, is Bannon choosing to testify days before his trial a defense he could use against these contempt charges, and will they work?
Brian, Stephen Bannon sees it that the writing is on the wall that he's going to be convicted. So I think what he's doing by asking to testify or agreeing to testify at this point, he wants to mitigate his losses in the sense that once he is convicted, he wants to, doing sentences, let a judge know, like, look, I volunteer to speak in front of the committee. I volunteer to actually talk at this time, but it's too little too late. At this point, he's facing 1 month up to 12 months in custody and a fine from $100 up to $100,000. So we'll wait and see what's going to happen, but I think it's too little too late.
Yeah, and Terri, this is a little aspect that I thought was interesting as well. Why do you think Bannon attached a letter from former President Donald Trump waiving a privilege many argued never existed?
Well, he's trying to say that that privilege did exist and that Trump has the right to waive the privilege, and Trump is trying to claim the same thing. But I agree with Bernarda. She says too little, too late. I say too bad, so sad. Bannon is definitely going to either pay a fine or go to jail, and here's why. Judge Nichols basically dismissed all of his defenses. He not only said you're not going to win a motion to dismiss, but he said you have no defense of privilege. He said you have no defense that the process didn't work right. So his only defense is going to be that it wasn't intentional, and he's not going to be able to show that because he completely ignored that subpoena that was issued back in September. And even if he had just responded and said, just postpone, that might have helped, but he didn't do it.
Sounds like you got bad legal advice leading up to this. Well, Bernarda and Terri, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We'll see you next time as we discuss justice in America.